The largest strike in Canadian history is largely over after the government and the Public Service Alliance of Canada reached a deal in the middle of the night last night. It means 120,000 striking workers now have a tentative agreement and are no longer on the picket line. It's a 4-year tentative agreement. The government says it includes a pay raise of 11.5%, but the union says the pay hike is actually 12% and even higher if you calculate the compounded benefits. There's also a $2,500 lump sum payment and a side letter to work together on remote work. But the right to remote work was not included in the collective agreement like the union wanted. Mona Fortier is the president of the Treasury Board, and she joins me now from the foyer of the House of Commons. So, Minister Fortier, help me understand this half a percentage point. The government says 11.5% raise, PSAC says 12%. Why the different numbers?
Well, it's the baseline. We are expressing 11.5%, which shows that over 4 years, which is the good news out of this, we have a fair, competitive, and reasonable deal that has been struck with the PSAC. And the 0.5 we're talking about is for group specifics, therefore it's embedded in the agreement. And we are very happy to have found this tentative deal, and I know that many, many nights and days have been going forward with important talks, finding creative solutions, and today we have that in front of us.
Okay, so you say this will cost government about $1.3 billion a year, if I heard you correctly earlier. Yes. I mean, can you afford that and sustain the workforce at its current level with this increase in the payroll?
Yes, this is part of the mandate that I had. It also, as you know, in the first year it's 1.5, then we go to 4.5, which shares the inflation, and then we go back down. Therefore, the 1.3 is half of what PSAC's demands were at the beginning. And we can afford this to make sure that we have public servants that are paid well and also that it's reasonable for taxpayers.
Okay, so walk me through how the remote work arrangement will function, because the PSAC wanted this as a bargain right in the collective agreement and said it's a letter of understanding or a letter of agreement. What if there is a disagreement on whether an employee should be able to work remotely or not? How is that resolved if the grievance process isn't available to the union?
Well, first we have to say that the letter of intent brings the fact that we will have a review of the telework directive that hasn't been reviewed since 1993. And we know that with the pandemic, with the fact that we were working by necessity at home and now by hybrid, where public servants can work from home 3 days a week, we will be reviewing the telework directive, enabling to see how we can continue to offer the best services to Canadians. The second idea in the letter of intent is a committee that will be enabling managers to hear both parties on different understanding of different realities, I would say, in telework, and therefore it will give an opportunity to share opinion and use that information, I believe, into the review that we will be undertaking.
Right, so it gives an opportunity to share opinion, but does anything in this change this as a management right, that it is still the manager's final call whether or not an employee works from home? So that you did not give on that, what you called your red line?
Yes, ultimate red line at the end of the day was that it was a manager right, but what I am looking forward to is to have this review of the telework directive, because I believe that there's a lot to look into and that we will be doing together as soon as this deal is ratified.
So what's the timeline on doing that? I know the ratification process will take a bit of time, especially with the union as large as the PSAC, but surely a quick resolution on setting up some sort of scaffolding around the remote work arrangement is going to be a priority. So what kind of a timeline are we looking at here, Minister?
Well, it's a great question. I know that we'll have more details coming up. The review isn't part of the letter of intent, and we will be looking at making sure we go through this process and have the input from PSAC in this review.
Okay, just as a final question, where do things stand? It's 120,000 down, but 35,000 to go, right? I mean, where do things stand with the workers at the Canada Revenue Agency who are still on strike right now, looking for a raise north of 20%?
Well, I understand that they are back at the table negotiating, and they are with the Canada Revenue Agency are looking at ratifying a deal very soon, hopefully. We'll look at what happens in the next few hours maybe, or a few days, but I believe that the fact that we just signed a deal, tentative of course, with PSAC that is in line with the PIC Commission and also in line with a reasonable offer, I believe they have a model they can of course use to get to a deal, and I look forward to see how Canada Revenue Agency and the union get to that deal.
It sounds like you feel as though you've held the line when it comes to salary and it comes to remote work in your negotiations with the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Is that a correct read of your mood today?
Yes, I believe that we got to, first of all, make sure that we had a fair, reasonable, and competitive deal, and we got from 570 demands that we started with 2 years ago to where we are today, a lot of work and progress, and I believe we have the best deal on the table at this time.
Okay, President of the Treasury Board,
Merci.
Mona Fortier, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, for more on this and reaction to the agreement that was reached, we're going to turn now to Chris Aylward. He is the National President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Mr. Aylward, it's good to see you in the studio yet again.
Great to be back.
It's been a busy couple of weeks. Look, on the money, whether it's 11.5% or 12%, it depends how you lump it together. You got a smaller number over 4 years than you were seeking over 3 years. How disappointing is that?
It's not disappointing at all, David, to be quite frank with you. Our members, and I cannot thank every single PSAC member that walked the picket line during this strike, they actually enhanced the wages plus the other issues as well. So around the wages, it's 12.6 compounded,
right,
plus $2,500 lump sum pensionable payment. And then there's group specifics. For example, federal firefighters got a 4% what we call a market adjustment allowance.
Because they're so underpaid compared to other firefighters,
Correct,
right?
Correct. So the day that we announced the strike, the deadline for the strike, there was 2.06% per year on the table. That was the employer's offer. When we announced the strike deadline, that's when they put the PIC wages on the table at 9%. This agreement that we agreed to last night basically moves the wages almost a full percentage for the first 3 years. And then in that fourth year, we looked at what is the inflation expected to be to make sure that we've got that covered. So we did agree to the fourth year because we know we got the projected inflation rate covered, and plus it gives us another year, because if not, we would have been right back at this again next year.
Right, that's one of the things, because this contract's going to expire for a couple of years, and if you just did 3 years, you'd be right back at it. But you heard Mona Fortier there. She said this is going to cost about $1.3 billion a year, and she said that's less than half what your initial ask was for. I mean, if you got less than half of what you're looking for, I mean, how is that not more disappointing than the way you're portraying it right now?
You don't always get what you want when you go to a negotiating table. That's why it's called negotiations, right? You start off like this, both parties, and then you try to find somewhere in here. Look, the wages, we've said from day one, we were attempting to get wages that at least close the gap, and we're in line with the rate of inflation, and we've done this through this agreement, especially with the $2,500 pensionable lump sum. So if you're making $50,000, that's a 5% increase for you for that particular year. So again, when you look at all of the details, when you look at all of the table-specific money and all of the different groups as to what they're getting, we've got a pretty good offer. And again, it's thanks to the 100,000 members who walk picket lines.
Help me understand the lump sum. I'm not downplaying its significance here, but it's a one-time cost as opposed to a structural increase, which management tends to like because it doesn't compound, as you talked about the wage increases. What is that for? Is that a cost of living lump sum payment? Is that a signing bonus? How do you characterize this cash payment that your members are going to get?
So when we put that on the table, we said it will help with closing the gap, especially for our lowest paid members, those members that we've been talking about making $40,000 to $65,000 a year. So we said we need a lump sum payment to close that inflation gap. The employer, after they put the 9% on the table, after we announced the strike, they said we'll give you $500 non-pensionable, and we're like no. So again, we got it up to $2,500 pensionable. Our bargaining teams did a great job.
So was that the wiggle room that Mona Fortier had when she came back to you this weekend? Was it the lump sum payment increasing at that? Because, there's the fourth year, but the broad framework of the money doesn't seem to have changed too much from her offer last Tuesday. Was it the lump sum that got this done on the financial side over the weekend?
It was the additional general economic wage increase that we achieved over and above the 9%. And yes, absolutely, the $2,500 pensionable lump sum payment, that was extremely important, again, for our low paid members.
Okay, help me understand remote work, the arrangement in that, because we've talked many times here about how you wanted this into the collective agreement, and that was very important. You didn't get it in this. You've got a letter of intent to review it and come up with some sort of a process. But how is that going to give the members, your members, the protection they were looking for if it's not in the collective agreement and there's no grievance process? And you heard the minister, it still remains management's final decision.
Right. But what the minister didn't mention is that we moved them off to a position. So there's not going to be any more announcement about back in the workplace for 2 or 3 days a week or whatever. Now it's going to be case by case. I want a remote work arrangement. I go to my manager and ask, say, I want to work a remote work arrangement, and I would like to work 2 days a week, or 3 days a week, or 1 day a week, whatever it is. If that's denied, the manager has to provide you with the rationale in writing, and you do have avenues within your respective department or agency to have that decision reviewed. So the big thing there, it was that we moved them off. No, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to the largest employer in the country.
Right, but you can have it reviewed and you can get an explanation, but there's no mechanism to force them to give it to you the way arbitration would at the end of a grievance, right?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay, so you didn't get that, and I know you got the lump sum, but not keeping pace with inflation on wages like you're looking for, the 13.5% over 3 years that you wanted right away. Is that going to be a hard sell to your members, do you think?
Well, look, as I said, we asked our members to go on strike, and they did. Over 100,000 members walked picket lines during the strike across the country. And each and every one of those PSAC members should be very, very proud. Because of their job action, we enhanced those issues at the bargaining table during the 11 days of the strike. There's no doubt in my mind about that. If we didn't strike, we'd still be looking at 9% and a $500 non-pensionable signing bonus of some sort, and no allowances for the other groups as well. So by the members taking strike action, we did make gains during this strike. Certainly the money is not necessarily exactly where we would like to see it, but we certainly made gains in other areas as well around the remote work and seniority and the contracting out as well.
Right, and so your bargaining team is recommending ratification. How quickly does it get to the ratification process here? Because I presume the letter of intent and the remote work review, none of that can happen until this is signed, sealed, and delivered, right? So how quickly are you going to get at that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Nothing gets put into place until it's ratified. And we're looking at getting all of the information out to our members literally in the coming days, and then hopefully have this ratified literally in the coming weeks as well.
Okay, and what about the CRA, Mr. Aylward? How quickly do you think the workers with the Canada Revenue Agency, where do talks stand there? How, what is the vibe at that table? Has the government made a final offer to them like they did to the bulk of the membership on Friday?
Just before I came to the studio, I had learned that they had just received an offer from the employer. So late this afternoon was when our CRA bargaining team received the first offer from the employer.
It's first offer. Is this not being characterized as a final offer like the one you saw on Friday?
No, they said that was their first pass. So, but again, our bargaining team has been there since 10 o'clock this morning, and they get the first pass from the employer at close to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, with 35,000 members on strike. There has to be some sense of urgency here on the part of the employer. That's just not there.
And today is tax filing deadline. Do you think the government needs to extend that if this is the way negotiations are going to be going?
I don't dictate policy for CRA. That would be a question for the Commissioner of CRA.
Okay. Chris Aylward, National President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada, thanks for coming in again today, as you have throughout the last couple of weeks. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, David.